ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene. And together with me is, of course, my crime-in partner, not Gauri, but Azrul, to talk about Budget 2015. Nowadays, the news is filled with sedition acts news. But with us in Durian ASEAN, we try to feature more about Budget 2015, as in is the most important issue until the 10th of October when the government announced it. As you know, yesterday, did you queue up at the gas station? Because I did. I was one of those idiots who, I would say idiots because I'm just saving probably 10 ringgit out of 60 ringgit of petrol pumping it into my car tank. But in a sense that I was but I was part of those people who queue up waiting for probably 15 to 20 minutes because the area wasn't that jammed to get my car tank filled. Were you part of that?
No, thing is, I don't even own a car, so I'm a firm believer in public transport.
I thought you want to say I'm too smart for that. I'm sorry, but 10 ringgit means nothing to me.
Hey, no, actually, when you think about it, it's actually a 20 cents increase, right? Which translates to around 10% increase in the fuel prices. And it actually, at the end of the day, on a larger scale, you say 10 ringgit, some people, according to whatever their tank is, it's 17 ringgit. You translate that over a period of a year, that's, like maybe a few hundred ringgit there that you actually save. So
I did my calculation. I could save around 500 ringgit a year.
There you go. So
that's quite a number of money.
That's BRIM money for you,
Yeah, that's BRIM money for me.
Yeah, version 1.0 BRIM, yeah.
So yeah, a lot of areas that is really challenging when it comes to budget. 2015 is the last budget for this for this economic plan before we move on to the 10-year plan. And for the last budget, which is the 2015 budget, a lot of the issues are really controversial issues.
2014 budget.
The last 2014 and moving forward to 2015. Yeah. One of it is, of course, the GST. We discussed earlier with a representative from Cheng & Co. On the perspective of the business side. But from the layman's point of view, of course, the high cost of living would definitely be one of the reasons. But what is the real reason that people are not happy with the GST?
Well, a lot of people say that a lot of those who are in support of GST would ask you the question, how is it that a 6% increase in what is considered consumption tax, and for businesses who are making 500,000 ringgit, going to affect you as the everyday person who's going off to the pasar to go and buy stuff, or going to Tesco or wherever to buy. So there is a need to understand how does 6% translate to an increase in your daily expenditure. And the reality is this: anything that is looking like an increase in terms of how much things are charged, costs, etc., will inevitably result in increases in what you pay at the supermarket and how much you pay to wash your car, or to fill up fuel even, arguably, and also in terms of how you pay for services. So, at the end of the day, this isn't a situation of where you can avoid paying tax because you go and eat. No, it's not a situation of you can avoid tax because you avoid eating at McDonald's, where you have the current sales and services tax. This is a situation where this tax will affect almost everything that you actually consume.
And it will also affect business, like it or not.
Yep.
Pricing is the key area where business can be more competitive than others, and make money out of this. Yep. But if you if all prices goes up, then how can you be more competitive? And even Rosma, the discussion earlier, one of the speakers said, even Rosma said that cook at home. So the idea is to keep the economy, the money's being circulated so that the economy can somehow generate on its own. But if everyone is cooking at home, that means our economy, the makcik, selling food at the roadside and all that, all will be gulung tikar.
That's one of the things that you actually need to consider, the fact that businesses will inevitably, small and large or medium, will inevitably have an impact with regards to whatever taxes or charges you increase in order to stimulate revenue. Now, it's interesting to note that it was basically stated that this year the revenue that the government expected was going to be around 224 billion or so, and when you look versus the budget that was actually being tabled, we are running a little bit of a deficit budget, because it's actually more than 220 billion in terms of the budget. But the question is that how does, for example, a reduction in subsidies for fuel prices, you queuing up at the petrol station last night, translates to increased revenue for the government? And the reality is this: 20 cents translates to maybe around 1.1 billion in actual money for the government. The savings go for the government. So at the end of the day, it's not that much savings either. But what 1 billion less is more for the government. So at the end of the day, you have to ask them. The question then is, where does the money go once it's saved? And I think we need to be able to ask that.
Mm-hmm.
But the poor makcik who is making,
a humble nasi lemak or mee goreng at the pasar malam.
Yeah.
What about her? Like a lot of Malaysian businesses, like it or not, 90% of Malaysia's businesses are SMEs, small and medium companies, not MNC. Of course, MNC making the large chunk of revenue, but their numbers are very, very small if you compare to SMEs. And for the GST and other increases such as the petrol itself would definitely burden SMEs. And if the SMEs in Malaysia are not being supported, that means Malaysia's economy won't be able to be as healthy as we want it to be.
Well, that's where the government will argue back and say, no, that's not true. Because at the end of the day, right now, the growth for Malaysia is 6% of GDP, which is pretty good when you consider the fact that not too long ago everybody was in depression. It was basically the economy wasn't going so well. Now we're actually exceeding expectations. So government would say that the fears are unfounded, and that really, when you also consider recent revelations like the household income survey that was issued recently, the controversial one that said households in Malaysia now make basically around 5,900 ringgit a month. So they would say that actually.
Are you sure?
Yeah, actually, this is something that needs to be asked. Are we really
Are you sure their target area wasn't Bukit Antarabangsa?
I don't know, man.
Bukit Damansara?
Yeah, no, but these are questions that need to be asked, because you have a budget that is tailored to meet so many constituencies, the expectations of so many constituencies. But the reality is this: 80% of households in Malaysia qualified for BRIM, cash handouts. I don't know whether you know that. It's like the government's own figures indicated that 80% of households in this country actually qualified for receiving the cash handouts to assist them in basically dealing
80%, would they all be situated in outskirts of urban areas?
This is across the country.
Across the country.
Yeah, and you know what the qualification is? The threshold? If you make less than 3,000. So you have this situation where also, I don't know whether you're aware of this, is that next year, what the government is actually also doing is to have something called a GST, BRIM Plus.
Oh.
GST.
BRIM plus GST.
Yeah, it's special cash handout for dealing with the GST increases. So you have 650 ringgit, which is BRIM money, and then you have another 300 ringgit to deal with
whatever the GST related expenses.
Exactly. So you actually have now for next year not only BRIM, and you also have another 300 to deal with it. But this is where it doesn't make sense. You have this HIS data that says that you're making 5,900, but 80% of households actually qualify for it. So at the end of the day, whatever that comes out from the budget, this coming budget, needs to be able to accept the reality of this. A small percentage of Malaysians and most businesses are subsidizing or supporting programs which are benefiting most of Malaysians who are earning less than what we expect them to earn. So we can't take it lightly in terms of the issues and problems that this situation actually highlights. The fact that it's not something yang boleh dibanggakan or be proud of, that 80% of households qualify for this cash handout. That means we have failed. It means also that there is a widening in the income gap, and that those who are getting richer, and those who are getting poorer are getting poorer. And if we are saying that most households can't make enough to be able to survive in an urban environment, then we're going to see an increase in number of relative poor people in cities.
Let's focus area by area.
Sure.
So you mentioned earlier mostly on people who are not able to earn enough, and hence they have to resort to welfare policies like BRIM and BRIM Plus, which is something new to me. But what about SMEs? Apparently, it's more than just 90%. According to, this is from the government's official budget 2014 website.
Wow,
Apparently,
sounds so official.
no, apparently, in case anyone do not know about it,
Yeah.
The government do have an official web page dedicated on budget 2014. And you can access all the different documents, including the speech text of the government. And SME is accounted for 97.3%. That's a huge number of registered businesses under SME, and contributes around 32% of GDP. Although the government hoped to increase it to 40%. But to increase it even to 40%, that means SME need to make enough money to be able to profit out of this, and to be able to franchise this and make it, into a more sustainable business focus. And throughout, if you look at from the 90s until now, you can see there's a growing number of entrepreneurs wanting to make it in Malaysia, make it into the Malaysian dream. But have they really make it or not? That is only the numbers can tell us. Right now, we are still at 32.4%. That means that majority of the SMEs in Malaysia are not really making the Malaysian dream that probably they are hoping to make.
The potential hasn't been fully realized. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. When you look at the SMEs still being at a certain level, that in comparison to regional markets like in Indonesia and Philippines and Thailand, I think we have this amazing first world country infrastructure, and then we have these SMEs who are working at, first or second year, whereas they can go to third and fourth, and be able to. Well, we're not talking about tax breaks, We're not talking about tax. We're talking about maybe cutting down on things like bureaucratic red tape. We're talking about perhaps a much more consolidated understanding of how taxes are derived from, because at the end of the day, the government is still making money out of SMEs, and different businesses. You look at the fact that last year, in 2012, the government actually made 210 billion out of revenue total, and half of that came from businesses. So at the end of the day, there is, just based on tax receipts alone, a very clear indication that the economy is pumping along. People are making money. People are expanding the businesses. But it could be better. And I think when you want to have business-friendly policies, the government needs to be able to listen to what businesses are saying needs to happen. And I can tell you this. Majority of them will talk about waste and bureaucratic red tape. when it comes to doing business in this country.
Okay, these are statistics from the budget 2014 in terms of the subsidy rationalization plan, which include the 20% hike up for the petrol price. Apparently, the government has spent almost 47 billion in 2013 for various types of subsidies, including petrol products, food, health, agriculture, fisheries, utilities, even toll. And welfare as well as education. So is it okay for the government to spend that much? Are they getting an equal ROI or return in investment?
Consider this: the budget this year was around 270 billion, I think. So take that, 60 billion in subsidies. That's a huge chunk of the budget that's being allocated just for subsidies. Question would be that the money could be used for other things, or the money could be saved, or you don't have to spend it at all. Basically, you translate it to something else, right? So right now, if you're getting your money's worth, what does that look like? Say you reduce the subsidies for fuel today at 20 cents.
Which the government justified it will save around 21 billion, more than 21 billion ringgit. If 47 minus 21, that means the government only need to spend 20 to 30 billion for 2015.
Sure. But the question then is that in order for you to talk about savings, you don't spend the 20. You just cut down on your expenditure to make up for that. So you don't then use that 20 billion and then spend it on defense, for example, and this is one of the things that we need to be able to understand the budget a little bit better. And it's just like accounting 101. You put in your budget, you want to spend this much, and then you have income, and then you have your actual expenditure. You can have a deficit, which means you have to borrow from someone, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to spend within your means. The current, I don't know whether you know this, is that we have a credit card limit in this country. The credit card limit is 55% of GDP. And the good thing is that we've actually decreased that now. It's no longer 55% anymore. It's around, I don't know, 40 something percent of the GDP. So it's no longer as much as it was in the past. In the past, we were very close to maxing out. But at the end of the day, what we actually have is a situation where we need to be able to look at what we are arguing as savings and take it as savings, and not be looking at a situation where we just spend it on something else. And that's important.
You know, the problem that I have with all these different budgets, it looks good on paper.
Sure.
It is addressing a lot of different areas that we need to address in terms of putting money in it. And one of the key areas is definitely education. Do you know that, I have to say this, the government spent or allocated 54.6 billion ringgit for education?
Yeah.
But are they getting the world's best education? Are they getting their return of investment? At the end of the day, no matter how much money you spend, if you look at the chart among other countries, actually, Iran spend less or almost at the same amount, or even less actually, in terms of education with us, but they are getting better ROI.
Yeah.
They have world-class researchers, scientists. Even though it's an Islamic republic, they managed to have a world-class education.
You know, it's something to be said that one of the key words that is unfortunate when we talk about Malaysia is the word wastage. And this is one of those situations. It's getting your money's worth, value for money is something that we haven't been able to do very well. I don't know whether it's because we're now an upper middle income country, therefore we feel we can splurge more. But the reality is precisely that. Is that, are we getting quality education? Are we getting enough for the money that we're putting in? Or are we just taking it easy and spending it just how we want to? We get excited about building new buildings, new infrastructure. We get excited about being able to connect schools, every single school with 4G networks. But then we don't do anything about the human capital part of it, the software of the hardware. So
we put
we
a lot of
spend the
money in it.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
spend a lot
to
of money.
justify it, the government did put a lot of money in all this human capital development, including education and even healthcare. But is there any ROI coming in? They even have, I don't know whether you are a recipient for it, the One Malaysia book voucher, which I heard is actually really, really good to those who really love
Sure,
books.
yeah.
It actually helped them a lot to buy good books, with the voucher.
Well, considering how expensive books are in this country, yeah, I suppose you need some assistance to buy the books, right?
For example, Thomas Piketty,
Yeah.
the famous economist, French economist that wrote the book Capital, his book is selling at 160 ringgit
Yeah.
at Kinokuniya. Who can afford that?
Yeah. No, but consider this. There's some strange things happening, like you have an $8 book on the stands, and then you times it by around 3%, sorry, 3%. You times it by 3 or 4, you don't get 40 ringgit for the book. You get it much less. So, and then you include the profit and everything, and you suddenly find out that actually we're not making education affordable as much as we want, or we're not encouraging people to be a much more knowledge-based society as we want it to be. We're very material, and that's where when you look at where we've spent the money, unfortunately you'll find it in very expensive projects, you'll find it in new equipment, but no budget to service the equipment. I mean, I don't know if you know this one of the sources of entertainment, and I think, okay, I'm putting it very cynically, saying entertainment, but one of the sources of dismay that we have every year is the Auditor General's report. Now, the budget and the Auditor General's report needs to be read together, because the Auditors General's the AG's report would be able to tell you how well you've spent your money previously, in order for you then to respond to problems of wastage, problems of not allocating things properly and not being able to spend on things properly, and then you have the budget. But the problem right now in this country is very often that the Auditor General's report will say and list out all these problems, but there's no response to it in the budget. So it's business as usual in the budget. So you still have these crazy problems about buying expensive Sikorsky helicopters, for example, or helicopters from Russia, and then forgetting to include the maintenance budget for these helicopters. So you end up with helicopters that don't fly because they don't have any budget to service them and everything. So we've got to get rid of this wastage, And
Submarine that don't submerge.
well, it's still debatable. I think it's been sighted along the seas somewhere. But, and we have to put, and this is very important, high or expensive ticket items on the budget needs to have an oversight committee over it. We cannot allow parts of the budget to remain unaccountable. And things like defense, I think, requires a parliamentary oversight committee in order to look at what do we spend in defense, because the Ministry of Defense has requested an increase in its allocation of budget for the coming 2015, because it talks about the security concerns in the Sabah region against the neighboring countries. So
Against the enemy.
well, against the perceived enemy,
Perceived enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all these areas of expenditure definitely need to take into consideration, and I like your idea that you should put it side by side, the budget report as well as the
Auditor General's report.
or the AG reports.
Yeah.
We will take a short break. When we return, Azrul will be sharing with us more his anger and also
Not anger lah. Understanding about these things.
we will take a short break.
ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Azrul.
Yeah, we got a bit distracted having a conversation before
Money.
off air about economy. So, to resume our discussion about the budget, do you know that for any government to be transparent in its budget, it needs to have throughout the whole year cycle, it needs to table 8 different types of budget. Let me mention it. Pre-budget statement, executive budget proposal, which is the one that I think the government will be tabling on the 10th of October. Citizens budget, which is a lot of people do not know, even economists themselves. A simplified version of the budget is still the same principle. It's just that the language is of layman's language, and it's a way
easily understandable to the
easily
maxi on the street.
easily understandable is for the general public to be able to understand and access information about the budget. And the others are enacted budget, in-year reports, mid-year review, year-end reports, and audit reports. This I think would be the AG report. Auditor General report. So if you look at it, Malaysia probably would have 2 to 3 different budget, executive budget proposal, audit report, and maybe a mid-year review or something like that. So in a way, there's a lot of different budgets that the government haven't been fulfilling, and because of that, the discussion of budget has been very much lacking within the public spheres among Malaysians. It's only by people working in think tanks, government, academician, and all sorts.
Because it's an abstract exercise almost, you know. The good thing is that the next day, the media, the newspapers, the electronics media will have a breakdown as to what this encapsulates. You know, how much subsidies are provided, what kind of benefits are expected for, you know, SMEs, businesses, how much is allocated for education, defense, etc. So it breaks it down later on. But that's the newspaper people who are doing. The media are doing that in order for people to understand what's in the budget speech of the finance minister the day before. But the reality is precisely what you're saying, actually, is that you want to be able to ensure that there is ownership over key pieces of legislation such as the budget, you know, to the layman on the street. Because at the end of the day, we're all paying taxes one way or another. I know most people don't pay tax, it seems, apparently. But
well, we do pay the sales tax, so in a way, everyone pay.
Just because you go to McDonald's doesn't pay tax here. But really, it's one of those things. You know, we have ownership on issues in this country, and that includes also ensuring that we have a voice in whatever the government proposes. And I say proposes because these budgets need to be debated. They're not supposed to be just going through Parliament as, you know, de facto approval. It should be debated and agreed upon before it gets passed. Mm-hmm. And in order for that to happen, our MPs, members of Parliament as well, need to be knowledgeable. They cannot just be a part turut who's just going to just follow whatever a yes man of whoever is saying that they should have this in the budget. They should also be able to have an input into what the budget should be so that the government can respond to things like the Auditor General's report.
I want to ask you a trivial question. Do you know that...
Got trivial.
Do you know that each year, our budget, when the government presents the budget, there's a theme?
Oh yeah, of course lah. Got the
so last year's theme was strengthening economic resilience, accelerating transformation, and fulfilling promises.
Yeah.
And usually by the theme, you know, like what kind of budget allocation the government would put into. And if you compare it to Singapore, which is opportunities for the future, assurance for the seniors, you know that majority of the welfare budget will go towards the pioneer generation, which is their senior citizen, as well as the younger generation, especially in terms of healthcare and education.
Yeah. And actually this year's budget is important because it was the first budget after the general elections. And it was important, and precisely you just said it just now in terms of the theme, is that fulfilling promises. And I'm not entirely sure whether those promises were totally fulfilled because they're meant to be much more longer. But it's also a way for us to prepare for hard realities like the GST, for example, the 6% GST that's going to be coming in. These are going to be some of the hard realities that we're going to be able to have to face. But, Arlene, we've been speaking a lot about macroeconomics to some extent, but we haven't spoken perhaps enough about how it impacts the everyday person. Will sugar cost more? Well, maybe we eat less sugar, bagus sugar, right? But how much fuel will cost necessarily? Would transport be affected? I think we need to be able to realize that these things are going to have a serious impact on the lives of a lot of people. If it requires there to be a suddenly special cash handout to alleviate the impact of GST next year, that means the impact is going to be quite serious.
It is. And if you look at other countries, for example, South Korea, according to one of our colleagues, in South Korea, people are very sensitive with what kind of money the government is allocating for which industry or which area. People are very much well aware of the sum of money the government will be spending and tabling. But in Malaysia, people, even to some extent academicians themselves, are a bit, this is not the right word to use, but a bit blur about the kind of money, the kind of expenditure it will be. A lot of it are very reactionary, just like majority of the way people talk about issues. Like, for example, the price hike of petrol. It is not something new. The rationalization plan has been part of the government speech text for the budget 2014 since last year. And the government is aiming at increasing the price stage by stage until it reaches the price of 2 ringgit and 58 cents. Yeah. So this is something that you need to expect,
No, at the end of the day, what is being done right now is initiatives to increase the revenue for the government in order to deal with deficit, in order to deal with rising costs, but also to deal with the need to cater to Malaysians' own need to have things like subsidies, more welfare programs. The reason why things like fuel hikes hit people so hard is because there are more people who are affected by it. Income tax, despite the fact that 120 billion was collected in income tax last year, is not paid by most Malaysians. 6 million Malaysians or so pay income tax. Contributes to 120.
I don't know you know this piece of legislature or not, but for those who earn 8,000 and above, they will get 2,000 ringgit off.
Are you kidding me?
Yes, they will get 2,000 ringgit. Like, that's it.
What is that?
It's a way for the government to lessen the middle incomes bracket burden in a way that you get a tax relief of 2,000 ringgit.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look at that. Is that household or individual?
Individuals. It is by your income level.
But this is where we actually have to realize that there's no free lunch as well. If we keep demanding for more bantuan kewangan for for education, for example, we have those school vouchers, book vouchers, and then we have different initiatives that they have where each actually involves ringgits and cents being transferred. It's going to have to come up from somewhere. It's not free money.
My take on welfare program, it has to be structural.
Yes.
Let's say you give free education like what Germany is doing with its tertiary education.
All the way up to university level.
All the way up to university. I think that is fine because the welfare money target is very structural. It's not about, just giving you fish every day.
Yeah.
It is actually preparing you to move forward, for the future of the economy of the country. So it's fine with me.
Yeah.
So for Malaysian government, it has to understand, is this welfare program short term or is it like just giving fish to the cats? Or is it something structural? It will help us towards moving forward in the future.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. We have to be able to strategize have targeted programs that benefit those who are most in need, and to ensure that perhaps rather than have a situation where most people don't pay tax, perhaps we should have a situation where most people would pay some form of tax or another to their income, which allows them to participate better, have ownership. And the situation is this, is that in Malaysia we have almost full employment. It's like 4% unemployment rate basically. But the reality is that most people, as we mentioned very early on, make like less than 3,000 ringgit, you know. And if that, when you consider against the quality of life as well as the increase in the expenditure for living expenditure, you cannot get this quality of life you expect in comparison to countries like Singapore, for example, or in Bangkok, or we like to compare to the US and UK or something. You can't, you know. 3,000 ringgit, it's like maybe less than 1,000 US dollars a month. So at the end there, we're going to have inflation is also something that we actually have to keep an eye on, because inflation is around 4%. So what's happened is that our earnings and wages today have not kept up with the increase in the cost of living. You have a situation where we're still earning as much as we did maybe 15 years ago. Entry-level executives today actually earn maybe slightly less than what they would have earned maybe 10, 15 years ago. You know, it's now maybe 1,008, 1,006. So we haven't kept up. And with fuel prices going to be increasing, perhaps it's time to leave the car at home, take public transport, support public transport, and for the government, invest in public transport. The problem today with regards to public transport is that we didn't have the courage to invest in it earlier so that we can reap the benefits today. So today we're paying for it because now we're building the MRT and everything. We should have done it earlier.
Well, we don't have much time. Actually, we are over the time now,
okay.
Unfortunately. But just to add your point about public transport, now not everyone is taking the public transport. You can see it evidently because every day when you go to work, I mean, if those who are driving cars, when during the rush hour is a lot of people and a lot of cars as well. So that means the public transport is not really maximizing in terms of the number of people taking it. Yeah. But at the same time, if you look at the public transport, it's not able to accommodate full capacity of people.
Yeah, the investment's not there.
So even if everyone choose to take public transport and become more eco-friendly, the public transport itself cannot sustain that amount of people. That's the reality.
We're in a catch-22 situation. Mm-hmm. But the good thing is remedial measures are being made. MRT is finally being built, so we'll have that up and running by 2016, and maybe things will get a little bit better. But
Sure. And more discussion in the next 2 weeks with, of course, Azrul and a few other people. Of course, this is a very wide spectrum discussion when it comes to budget. It's not just about cost of living, GST, and BRIM, but there are a lot of other components that need to look forward. And this would include not just the public, but also businesses as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's all for today. Thank you very much, Azrul.
Thank you, Arlene.